This is the Canadair, the plane that Spain and many other countries use to put out fires. And today, after a lot of work, we're gonna get on board one of them to show, like never before, what these pilots experience. Let's go! We've come all the way to the Torrejon Air Base, home to the 43 Group, a very special unit of the Air and Space Force because they fly like no one else does. We've gotten permission to board one of their planes on a training mission to show the real stress experienced in these cockpits.
It gives you the feeling of landing on a mirror. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your home, your new home.
Let me introduce you to Fernando Adrados, a major in the Air and Space Force and our pilot for today. In addition, he is without a doubt one of the best people to talk about these missions, since he has flown for many years as a pilot with the 43 Group.
Well, the 43 Group is the best unit you can be assigned to. No, just kidding. But it is the unit of the Air and Space Force in charge of fighting forest fires from the air.
You see, by using an aircraft for this task, they are able to take advantage of aviation to attack the fire from above. Of course, in return, they have to fly in a very complicated flight profile. I'm sure you've seen them on TV or on social media at some point, but as always, we overlook the tremendous training, planning, and organization behind these missions. The idea with this video is to show absolutely everything that usually isn't shown.
The main difference between flying a regular plane, so to speak, and flying a Canadair is the water.
The plane doesn't just carry and drop water, but it's also able to change its landing configuration to land on water, in the middle of a lake, or even in the sea. This type of aircraft is known as a seaplane. Specifically, this one is designed to be able to refill its water tanks without having to return to an airport. This way, the number of drops over a fire increases, taking advantage of the ability to refill in a reservoir that is close to the fire. In total, the 43 Grupo has 14 planes as of the recording date of this video. Throughout the year, the planes are based at Torrejon Air Base, but when summer arrives, they are distributed across the Iberian Peninsula, along with the personnel to operate them. Approximately 5 people are needed for each plane, but in order for the plane to operate every day, taking into account that people need to rest, 2 full crews are deployed with each plane. This way, in the summer, wherever a fire appears, there will always be a plane relatively close and operational. Interestingly, these aircraft technically do not belong to the Air and Space Force. In Spain, there are several ministries. One of them is the Ministry of Defense, and within it are the armed forces, which include the Air and Space Force, the Navy, and the Army. But the Canadair planes belong to another ministry, and it is this ministry that lends them to the Air and Space Force so that they can be operated by its pilots and mechanics. And be careful, because unlike what people usually think, fires don't start exclusively during the summer. It is true that during these months it is the most intense period, but the reality is that fires occur throughout the year that need to be put out. Also, the 43 Grupo does not go to every fire that occurs. In fact, as they told me, they usually go to those that have already exceeded 500 hectares. Just for reference, this is a map of Madrid, and these marked areas would be 500 hectares. So you could say that when they're called, it's because things are really messed up. Something curious is that the pilots have a maximum number of hours they can fly each day. This is because as the hours go by, fatigue builds up. And since they fly so close to the ground, it's extremely important to be fully capable. That's why the limit is 9 hours per day. In the summer of 2025, Spain suffered one of the most devastating fires in its history. The magnitude was such that Spanish resources were not enough to control the fire, but that's what European cooperation is for.
The rescue, which is a system of the European Union that allows planes from different nations operating firefighting aircraft to respond to emergencies in other countries. For example, Spain activated the rescue by requesting aircraft assistance. An Italian aircraft came, 2 French Canadairs, and Slovak helicopters. That is, this year the ones who needed help were us. In previous years, we have been in countries like Italy many times, Tunisia, Greece, Bulgaria,
in Morocco. Now that you have a bit of context, we can move on to the plane.
For today, Focus 73 is a 215 turbo of the two planes we have. Let's call them modern and old. Well, today we have one of the old ones.
The name of the plane is quite interesting, especially because of the T at the end. You see, this aircraft was originally called CL-215, and it was powered by two piston engines. But with the improvement of turbine engines, it was decided to change the engine and replace it with a turboprop. And that, without a doubt, was a considerable improvement, generating more thrust while reducing weight and increasing reliability. That's why the current name of this plane has a T at the end, indicating that it's the version with a turbine engine.
As we've discussed, what makes this plane unique is its water system. Few realize the water enters and exits through different places. Entonces vamos a comprobar. So let's check from back here. If you come in here with me, these are the drop doors that everyone knows, where the water comes out. The 3 tons in this case through one door and 3 tons through the other, 3,000 liters, about 10 in 1 second. That's how long it takes the plane to release it. And yet, where the water comes in is simply through these 2 small probes, one on this side and one on the other. For each tank, they have about the surface area of a hand, 3, and they go in. 3,000 liters in 10 seconds, that is between 280 and 300 liters per second, using only the plane's hydrodynamic pressure without any suction method. Also, even though the landing gear is retractable, it doesn't go completely inside the plane, the tires remain outside. The idea is for the keel or hull of the plane to be as clean as possible. That's why the landing gear doesn't go inside, of course.
One of the features you can see is that this is a boat. I mean, the bottom part from the middle down is a boat, exactly.
Something essential for this aircraft is the fact that it has a high wing. This configuration mainly aims to keep the engine as far from the water as possible, since when landing on water, the water's surface almost reaches the middle of the fuselage. Obviously, if the wing were lower, it would be impossible to perform this maneuver. And what's incredible is that, actually, the plane is practically empty inside. The water tanks are quite small, but the plane has to be that large to load and unload 6,000 tons of water in a stable way.
Well, this is the most important part of the plane. As close as possible to the center of gravity, we have the 2 tanks. They are 2 tanks of approximately 3,000 liters each. And they have interesting features like overflow pipes, for example, so that if we load water above the maximum capacity of the tank, it doesn't affect the structure and the excess water goes directly outside. Likewise, we can see these injectors on both tanks. They are the inlets for the foam concentrate. Normally, we load water and drop regular water, but at the request of the firefighting coordinator, we can mix it with an agent we carry inside the plane, and it generates foam. So we would drop foam instead of water, which can be much more effective in certain fires.
The firefighting coordinator is the person in charge of organizing all the aircraft and ground personnel who are working to put out the fire. He tells everyone where and how they should do their job, and he's usually up in an aircraft watching everything from above. But the real magic of this plane happens in the cockpit.
Well, welcome to a World War II bomber. This is our workspace. This is the cockpit of the Canadair 215 Turbo. As you can see, it's all dials, all analog. As for the cockpit, it's standard for a plane. It has lights, an electrical system, and fuel system. But really, the most significant thing, so to speak, is the water system. As you've seen the tanks, this is the indicator, the water tank quantity indicator. You see that there are up to 6,000 pounds per tank. That means in total it's 12,000 pounds, which is about 6 tons of water. It has several parts from which we operate the water system. One is the masters, which you use to set up the whole system and give power to the system so that the gates can also close. And then once you're in the water with the whole system running, once you settle on the water with this button, which is for the probes, those probes we showed you downstairs, then you would lower this. The mechanic would do it. You load the desired water amount, lift it when done, and that's it. It's all manual. Once you're in the air, you arm the system to enable the water drop, which is this button here. With this button, you're flying, looking outside, and when you figure it's time to drop, you press it, and that opens the doors. You would see that on this light panel, which shows you all the lights, if they're open, if not, if one gate is open, if another is closed, if another is ready for another drop, and so on.
Wait, because what Fur just said is very important. The switch is used to disable the opening of the doors when the plane is on the water, because if the gates were accidentally opened, the plane would definitely crash. In fact, it's something so critical that there are several safety barriers to prevent the door from opening when the plane is on the water.
We have several safety barriers. We always enter with this disarmed. It's forbidden to touch the water drop, and you're not allowed to use the radio because, interestingly, if you notice, the water drop is right next to the PTT, which is another one that's used. For tactical communications during a fire, you're always making radio calls. And they're very close together, and it has happened, and it will happen to everyone. It's like with motorcyclists. There are those who have fallen and those who are going to fall. Well, here, there are those who have dropped it and those who will at some point, because it's happened to all of us. And you get quite a scare. Suddenly you're flying, communicating with another plane over an area of the fire, and suddenly you run out of water. It makes a lot of noise. You're going to see it now in flight, how noticeable that drop is.
If you notice, Fur introduced it as a World War II bomber, and that's exactly what it is. A plane designed to drop several tons at once. Just for reference, a B-17, one of the most famous bombers of World War II, typically carried a load of 3.5 tons on its missions. The Canadair can carry up to 6, and most importantly, it can drop all that weight at once. Exactly like a bomber. As you can see, there were 4 of us in the pre-flight briefing, and that's because this plane flies with 2 pilots and a flight engineer sitting in the center who helps to reduce the pilot's workload. So let me introduce you to the other 2 members of today's crew.
I'm Captain Jimeno. I'm Subteniente Oscar Santana.
Alive.
Auto feather armed. 40.
Yeah, same here.
100%. 60 transfer of command.
Okay, re-end up.
And 119.
All good.
In the air, you pass your V2 and cleanup speed.
Okay, up. Come.
And that's our bird.
Prácticamente nuestro playground de toda la vida, ¿vale?
We have to fly branches, it has mountains, it has plains, it often has turbulence, it has loads in curves, sometimes it mirrors itself.
Something you'll notice during the flight is that these missions are done visually. In commercial aviation, a series of waypoints are followed that lead you to the runways. So by following them and with the on-screen aids, it's relatively easy to reach the exact point where you need to land. But in a water pickup, the process is completely different. The pilots rely on their experience to know what is the best way to descend. When operating so close to the ground, dangers appear that usually aren't a problem for other planes, like high-voltage wires, drones, or even birds. In fact, the 43rd Group has developed something like airport charts, but for reservoirs, indicating locations of high-voltage wires, radio frequencies, and similar information. For the Tazar Reservoir, there were several points to consider. The main thing was to know where we were going to perform the water pickups. Secondly, to remember where the wires in areas with emerging rocks were in case the reservoir level was low. As you can imagine, this information is super useful to have the particularities of each reservoir identified in advance. And in this case, a very important point to keep in mind was also the risk of birds, especially because here I could actually help them.
Pay attention to the issue with the birds.
Okay, yes,
I was very quite
dangerous. As Javi says, that's fundamental, okay? It's true that it's a plane that flies slowly, but it's a risk that we're constantly exposed to, okay? We have to be extremely careful, and we're going to ask that you use your eyes to help us mitigate risk today. And whenever you're looking outside, always be on the lookout for birds. Don't be afraid to say, bird on the right, bird on the left. And that allows us, with this very maneuverable aircraft and the speed we're going, to avoid them.
And in fact, there were a few times when I warned them that I saw a bird ahead.
In the end, we usually have 6 eyes on the lookout here, and we always work like this. When one of us looks inside, the others look outside, and that's how we do it. I look inside, and then the other says, okay, someone is looking inside, so I have to be extra vigilant outside.
And this is something they did constantly. While one was checking the instruments inside the plane, he would say it out loud so the other pilot would look outside. In fact, you could tell they had it so ingrained that it was automatic.
If the weather allows, we do a standard assessment of the reservoir. The wind will be coming from the north. We've checked it. It's facing, I think, to load towards the north. On the branch that goes towards the town from Beruco, well, this is our axis, okay? I've seen the exits over there. All this area is the escape route in case of engine failure, okay? It follows the valley up to the Somosierra Pass if that's the case, and then you gradually climb up. But today, with the wind we have, the performance doesn't really improve, but it makes things easier for us, okay? When it comes to heading out that way. We have quite a bit of wind, slightly crosswise, for scooping on this arm, which we'll use today. All right, if you're ready, let's get into the water. Okay, Sergio, let's go. We're going to take on 3,000 liters. A standard load. I'll ask you for the checks when we're in the water.
Perfect.
Everything okay, Sergio Hidalgo? Yes, let's get in the water. Let's go. Let's see how it goes.
Well, everything's fine. 105 knots.
Let's go.
Everything's ready. I have to go.
Are we in the water?
No.
All right.
Come on, it's all good. Into the water.
I'm going there.
Process up. It's ready now. Okay, it's ready now. Okay.
Straight, just straight, just straight. Yes, yes, yes.
There you go. In the air, armadillo armed. Push in the air.
As you just heard, as soon as we get airborne, the doors are armed so they can be opened at any moment. This is in case the plane has an emergency. In almost all emergencies, the procedure tells you to dump the water to weigh less. That's why, as soon as you get out of the water, this system is armed.
All right, let's make the drop, okay?
Okay.
Club 1515 is armed in Bode motor heavy, hydraulics, correct? And we make the drop there, okay? 15 continues, okay? We're going to simulate a fire, okay? Well, look, as you can see, the exit route at a fire is always in this kind of terrain, and there tends to be this kind of turbulence, so you have to be careful. In this case, whatever happens, we would exit to the left, which is where we can go down the valley the most.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and as you can see, right now I'm handling the controls and Javi is managing the power, okay?
Of course.
And Oscar is checking everything else. So we try to maintain, despite the turbulence, between 100 and 120 knots. And when we're there, we'll 3, 2, 1 out. Flap 10, 2 doors open, water out, 70 with doors closed. Okay, then flap 0, I'll set you to 0, 70 is yours.
But, to be honest, that drop wasn't like the ones they usually do during missions. It was a watered-down drop since we were flying over the lake. Later on, they told me they wanted to show me what a drop is like in a difficult area. So pay attention, because what you're about to see is incredible. The idea was to simulate a fire at the end of this cliff, right where the reservoir begins, since the drops have to be done over the reservoir during training. Any pilot is aware of the skill required to do this kind of flying. Keep in mind that the person flying the aircraft has to constantly measure the distance between the wings and both sides of the cliff. And all this considering that there are tall trees, there could be birds, high voltage wires. And now imagine all that if we also had a fire below us. One of the unique abilities of this plane is that it can land on water and come to a stop. So, of course, we had to try it. Let's go.
All right, so let's stop, okay?
All right.
With the cables in plain sight.
For us, look!
It's essential, okay? Never lose sight of them. The tower is in sight and very visible. We know their location well because we always train here. But there are others that, when you go to places you've never been before, can surprise you. And it's very, very dangerous.
But you can't see them at all.
Come on, let's keep it short, okay? And let's stop, okay? Okay.
Flap 10, get it right. Come on, 10, 10. Yes. There you go, okay?
I'm going to have a heart attack. A damn boat, man.
I mean, this is incredible. Right now we're going 110 kilometers per hour.
That's crazy.
Well, now you're on a boat.
That's insane, man. Wait.
Wait, but look at those waves.
That's not normal.
You see? This plane has many interesting features, including a nose hatch you'll see later.
Actually, there's a reason for this hatch at the front, and it's that the plane has an anchor, literally like on ships, and that's the hatch you would go out of to drop it or to tie the plane up at a port. Also, thanks to its ability to land on water, the aircraft can operate from seaports without needing an airport. Something you might know is that the members of the 43rd Group are known as privateers. In fact, they have their own official patch. But many people think that the name comes from the fact that their plane, deep down, behaves like a ship. But this has nothing to do with it. In aviation, someone who ignores standard procedures, like taking off without a flight plan or flying too low, is called a pirate. In ancient times, some governments resorted to pirates to defend their interests. At that time, those pirates started operating legally, and they were called privateers. Something similar happens in the 43rd Group. Their way of flying is so unique that in any other branch of aviation, they would be called pirates. But in this case, they do it because their mission requires it. They need to fly low, maneuver at the limit, or even drop water from the plane. And since they do all that backed by the law, it makes sense to call them privateers. In this video, you've met 2 pilots and a flight engineer, but what you've seen is just a small part of what this unit really is. Behind the scenes, there are many more people without whom it would be impossible to operate the aircraft, from the rest of the pilots and flight engineers to the ground crew. Even those who are no longer in the unit still feel like part of the privateers. Many of them have the emblem tattooed on their skin because it goes far beyond just a job. When you fly like this every day, you feel like you're part of a family.
Where should I aim?
Where should I aim?
Put it out there. Let's go.